When Clara moved into my house, she brought only 2 suitcases and a silence so heavy it filled every room. I remember the way she stood on my front porch that morning, her eyes swollen, a crumpled tissue in one hand and a folded marriage certificate clutched in the other. I can't be alone in that house, Mary," she whispered. Her voice cracked like something broken beyond repair, and what could I say? My brother had been gone barely 6 weeks. The world still felt tilted without him in it. So, I stepped aside, opened the door, and said the words that would change everything. "Of course, Clara. This is your home now, too." Back then, I believed I was doing the right thing. The noble thing. Helping the woman my brother loved. I had no idea that by letting her in, I was also letting in a lie. The first few weeks were quiet, almost tender. Grief has a strange way of slowing time, like everything is covered in fog. We spoke softly, moved gently around each other, both pretending that normalcy would return if we just stayed busy enough. I'd make coffee early in the morning before work, and she'd sit at the kitchen table in her robe, staring into the steam of her mug like she was trying to find my brother's face in it. Sometimes she'd hum a tune he used to like, an old country song that made the house feel too small, too haunted. We didn't talk much about him, not at first. I thought it was too soon. I thought silence was mercy. She took over the guest room at the end of the hall. I helped her set up her things, hung her dresses in the closet, even framed a photo of her and my brother, the one from their wedding day. She smiled faintly when I placed it on her nightstand, though I thought I saw something else flicker in her eyes. Regret, maybe. Or guilt. I didn't know how to name it then. Back then, I was still working full-time at the library, long shifts surrounded by old books and quiet people. I'd come home around 7, and Clara would have dinner waiting. Chicken soup, pasta, casseroles, simple meals that smelled like comfort. She was soft-spoken, polite, even a little fragile. I pitied her, I really did. Losing a husband so young, no one should have to face that kind of loneliness, but grief, I would later learn, can look a lot like performance if you stare at it long enough. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear her talking on the phone in the kitchen. Low voice, urgent whispers, the back door creaking open and shut. Once or twice I thought I heard a man's name, but the moment I stepped into the hallway, silence. I told myself it was probably insurance agents, lawyers, or her family checking in. The woman had just lost everything, after all. I had no reason to doubt her, at least not yet. The first time something truly unsettled me was over a stack of mail. It was a Tuesday evening in late February. I came home to find a pile of letters on the counter, most addressed to me, but a few in my brother's name. One envelope was from the county clerk's office, stamped confidential. When I asked Clara about it, she smiled faintly, too quickly. "Oh, that's just paperwork from his pension," she said, sliding the envelope into her bag before I could ask further. Her hands trembled just a little. I noticed that. That night, while washing dishes, I caught myself thinking about how steady her voice had sounded when she lied, because I knew she was lying. I just didn't want to admit it yet. People say grief bonds families, but sometimes it fractures them in quiet ways. My mother, who lived 2 towns over, started calling less. My younger sister said she couldn't bear to visit because Clara's sadness filled the air like smoke. Even my neighbors, who once came by with casseroles, began to keep their distance. And through it all, Clara stayed. She began helping with bills, saying she'd received some insurance payout and wanted to contribute. I didn't argue. I was grateful, honestly. She even offered to help organize my brother's remaining documents, his files, his bank statements. That, I think, was her smartest move, because it made me trust her completely. One Saturday morning, about 2 months after she moved in, I walked into the living room and found Clara on her laptop, typing fast, a look of focus on her face. She didn't hear me at first. "What are you working on?" I asked lightly. She jumped, shut the lid, and said, "Oh, just updating my resume. I'm thinking of getting back to work soon." I smiled, relieved. "That's good. You need something to keep busy." She nodded, but her hands, they were trembling again. Something inside me stirred that morning. Not quite suspicion, but unease. like hearing a faint echo in a room you thought was empty. In the evenings, I started noticing small changes. A new perfume in the hallway, sharp, expensive, not something she could afford on her own. A designer handbag on the counter one morning, gone the next. A few new dresses, tags still attached. I wanted to ask, but every time I saw her eyes, red, tired, ringed with shadows, I stayed silent. Who questions a widow about her spending? Still, I started keeping small notes to myself, quiet mental records of odd moments. I didn't even know why. It was as if my instincts were writing their own story behind the one Clara told aloud. Then came the night I found the photograph. It was buried at the back of my brother's desk drawer, a photo of him and Clara, smiling at what looked like a courthouse. But there was something strange about it. My brother's smile was stiff, his arm loose around her shoulders. And behind them, the date etched into the courthouse wall was a month after the wedding date she had always mentioned. That small inconsistency sat in my chest like a splinter. The next morning, I asked her about it casually over breakfast. "You two got married in April, right?" She froze for a fraction of a second before answering. "Yes, April." But I'd already seen the photo. I knew the courthouse in that picture was closed for renovations that entire month. I'd read about it in the local paper. I smiled, said nothing more, and stirred my coffee. The sound of the spoon clinking against the cup was the only thing between us. That was the first time I realized I might be living with a stranger. After that morning, something shifted between us, invisible, but undeniable. Clara didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did and pretended not to. She still smiled the same, still made coffee in the mornings, still asked about my day with that soft, polite concern. But every word felt rehearsed. Every gesture, careful, and once you start doubting someone, you start seeing things you never saw before. It began with a phone call. I'd been dusting the bookshelf when her phone started ringing on the counter. A number I didn't recognize, no name, just private caller. It rang twice before I heard the soft click of her footsteps. She picked it up fast, whispering, "Hey, no, not now. She's here." Her back was to me. She didn't know I'd frozen mid-step, heart pounding in my chest. When she hung up, she turned and smiled, casual, like nothing had happened. "Wrong number," she said, but I noticed her hand, trembling again. That's when I stopped believing her. Over the next few days, I started watching. Not obviously. I wasn't ready to accuse her of anything, but quietly, in the way a librarian observes a reader who's hiding something behind a book. She left the house most afternoons now. Said she was going for walks, but always came back dressed too neatly, makeup too perfect. One time, her perfume hit me the moment she stepped in, not the one she used to wear when my brother was alive. This was heavier, more confident, almost defiant. I asked her casually one evening, "So, how was your walk today?" She smiled, eyes glinting. "Refreshing. I went by the park." But later, when I took out the trash, I saw her car parked 2 blocks away, facing the highway, and one parks for a walk near the highway. I kept telling myself I was overreacting. That grief makes people act strange, that maybe she was just trying to find her way back to normal life. But the truth is, my gut already knew the shape of betrayal. It just didn't have the courage to name it yet. Then, one evening, I found something that made denial impossible. It was raining that night. The kind of cold, whispering rain that makes old houses creak. Clara had gone to bed early, claiming she had a migraine. I went into the kitchen to make tea, and that's when I noticed her handbag left on the counter. A brand new leather purse, one I'd never seen before, that I didn't mean to open it. I swear I didn't. But the flap was already unbuttoned, and a corner of paper peeked out. Curiosity, they say, is just grief wearing a disguise. Inside the bag were receipts. A dinner bill from a fancy restaurant downtown, 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine. Another from a boutique that sold men's watches, and then, tucked between them, a folded photo strip from one of those mall booths. Clara and a man, smiling, laughing, her head resting on his shoulder. The date printed at the bottom was just 2 weeks ago. I felt the air leave my body. For a long time, I just stood there, staring at that strip of glossy paper, my mind blank. Then, carefully, I slid it all back into her bag. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house, the wind, the rain, her footsteps in the hallway, felt too loud, too wrong. I kept asking myself the same question over and over. Who was that man? And a darker one followed close behind. Had he been around before my brother died? The next morning, I watched her closely over breakfast. She looked calm, almost radiant, humming a tune as she poured coffee. Sleep well? I asked.
She smiled.
Better than I have in weeks. That smile, that calm. It felt like watching a play where I already knew the ending. Over the next week, I started keeping a small notebook tucked under my mattress where I jot down everything strange. Times she left the house. Numbers she called. The new perfume. The dinners she forgot to mention. It was an obsession. It was survival, because something in my gut told me this wasn't just a grieving widow moving on. There was a story beneath the story, and it had my brother's name written all over it. One evening, when she went out again, I decided to follow. I felt foolish sneaking out of my own house, coat pulled tight, heart racing like I was in one of those old noir movies. But curiosity had long turned into something sharper, need. I needed to know who she was meeting. She drove downtown, parked near the riverfront. I stayed far enough behind to not be noticed, just another shadow in the crowd, and then I saw him, tall, dark-haired, wearing a leather jacket. He greeted her with a kiss, not the cautious kind between friends, but the kind you hide from the world. MY's stomach turned. They walked together toward a small restaurant, the same one from the receipt in her bag. She laughed, that same soft laugh she used to give my brother when she wanted something. I stood there in the drizzle, watching the woman my brother had loved wrap her arms around another man, and all I could think was, how long has this been going on? When she came home later that night, I was still awake, sitting in the dark. She froze in the doorway, startled. Mary? You scared me. I smiled faintly. You were out late. She hesitated. Just met an old friend. I nodded slowly. That's nice. And that was it. No confrontation, no shouting. Just two women sitting across from each other, one lying and the other pretending not to notice. But inside, I made myself a promise. I would find out everything. Because if Clara had betrayed my brother, if she had been with that man before he died, then this wasn't just heartbreak. It was something darker, something that needed to come to light. The next morning, I called in sick to work. And for the first time, I went into my brother's old study, a room I hadn't entered since the funeral. Dust covered everything. His desk, his papers, his scent still faint in the air. I started opening drawers, sorting through documents, insurance forms, letters, photos. And then, in a small locked box at the back of the bottom drawer, I found a flash drive. No label. Just black plastic and a faint scratch across the side. I plugged it into my laptop, hand shaking. Inside were folders, financial records, scanned letters, and something else. A video file. Its name stopped my heart cold. Clara_Truth, MP4. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours before I finally clicked play. The video flickered to life, grainy, poorly lit, like it had been recorded in secret. My brother sat at his desk. His face looked tired, older somehow, even though he died barely 6 months ago. There was a tremor in his hands as he rubbed his forehead, took a breath, and looked straight into the camera. If you're watching this, he began, voice low and uneven. Then something went wrong. My chest tightened. I don't know who to trust anymore, he said. Clara's been lying to me. About everything. I froze. She says she loves me, he continued, shaking his head. But I found out she was never legally married to me. The papers, the ones she had me sign, were fake. She forged them. The lawyer she mentioned doesn't exist. He looked away for a moment, swallowing hard. I was too blind. Too in love to see it. But it's not just that, Mary. She's been taking money out of my account, thousands. I confronted her last week. She said she'd explain everything, but the next day she disappeared for hours. When she came back, she was calm. Too calm. He leaned closer to the camera. If anything happens to me, please don't believe her. Then the screen went black. I don't remember breathing. I just sat there, hands over my mouth, the echo of his voice filling the silence like a haunting. My brother he'd known, and she had still stood beside me at his funeral, crying into my shoulder, whispering how much she missed him. I closed the laptop slowly, afraid the truth might spill out and choke me. Then I replayed the video, twice, 3 times, just to be sure I wasn't imagining it, but it was real. His voice, his fear, his warning, and suddenly, every little thing I'd noticed about Clara, the lies, the late nights, the money that never added up, all snapped into place like puzzle pieces I hadn't realized I'd been assembling. I went to her room that night while she was out. I needed proof, something concrete that tied her to the fraud. Inside her dresser, beneath layers of neatly folded clothes, I found a folder. Inside were copies of documents, a marriage certificate with my brother's signature, and another version with his handwriting forged. There were also deposit slips, money transferred from his business account to hers, and at the very bottom of the pile, a single photograph, Clara and the same man from the restaurant. Only this time, they were dressed up, she in a white dress, him in a suit. Standing in front of a courthouse, it wasn't my brother's face beside her. I sank to the floor, that photo trembling in my hands. The betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. She hadn't just pretended to love him. She'd built an entire life around that lie, a script she played to perfection until the day he died. And now, she was living in his house, sleeping in his room. That evening, when she came home, I was waiting for her. She walked in humming, carrying takeout boxes. "You're up late," she said lightly. "I found the video," I said. The words sliced through the air. She froze mid-step. "What video?" "My brother's," I whispered. He knew Clara. He knew everything. For a moment, her mask cracked. Just a flicker, the tiniest flash of fear in her eyes. Then she smiled. "Mary, grief is making you imagine things. You shouldn't. Stop lying to me." I snapped, my voice shaking. "I saw the papers. The fake marriage license. The bank transfers. You used him. You used us." She set the boxes down slowly, her voice turning cold. "You shouldn't have gone through my things. And you shouldn't have forged my brother's name." I shot back. Her jaw tightened. "You don't understand. He was going to leave me with nothing. After everything I did for him. Everything you did." I said, laughing bitterly. "You mean stealing from him? Pretending to be his wife?" Her tone shifted, low and venomous. "You think you know what happened? You have no idea what your brother was like at the end. He was paranoid, controlling. I deserved that money. I earned it." The words hit like stones. "Earned it," I repeated quietly. "By lying to him? By lying to me?" Her eyes narrowed. "You wouldn't understand. You've never had to survive the way I did." There it was, the truth, naked and cruel. She didn't feel guilt, only justification. I took a step back, my hands trembling. "I'm going to the police." For a moment, silence. Then, slowly, she smiled again, that same gentle smile that once fooled us all. "No, Mary. You won't." That night was the longest of my life. I locked my bedroom door and sat by the window, clutching my phone. Every creak in the floorboards made my skin crawl. At one point, I thought I heard her outside my room, just standing there, but she never knocked. When morning came, she was gone, her closet half empty, her car missing. On the counter, a note in her perfect cursive. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Please don't make this worse." That's all it said. No apology. No explanation. Just a coward's escape. I went to the police later that day, carrying the flash drive, the documents, the photo, everything. They opened a case immediately. It turned out Clara had multiple identities. The husband in the photo was part of her earlier schemes. Together they defrauded 2 other men in different states. My brother had unknowingly become her third target. By the time the investigation began, she was already gone, accounts drained, phone disconnected, but her trail wasn't perfect. And the truth was now recorded, documented, undeniable. That night, after giving my statement, I came home and sat on the porch. The house felt different, lighter somehow. like it was finally exhaling after months of holding its breath. I thought about my brother's video, his tired eyes, the tremor in his hands, the quiet courage it must have taken to record that message. He had trusted me to finish what he started. And I would. The next morning, the police called again. They'd found a hotel room under one of Clara's aliases 2 towns over. Inside, her luggage, some cash, and a burner phone. But no Clara. IT wasn't over yet, not by a long shot. The police could only do so much. They logged her crimes, took my statement, collected evidence, but every time I asked if they'd caught her, the answer was the same. Not yet. Days turned into weeks. Then a month. Her absence lingered like a shadow, not visible, but always felt. Every time I passed my brother's room, I half expected to see her standing there again, pretending to belong. I couldn't bear the silence anymore. So, I turned it into purpose. The first thing I did was contact my brother's old business partner, Daniel. He'd been avoiding me since the funeral. Guilt, I assumed, because he hadn't visited much toward the end. But when I showed him the video and the documents, his face went pale. "Jesus, Mary," he whispered, pressing a hand to his mouth. He told me he thought something was off. But I didn't think, she was always so charming. "That's how she worked," I said quietly. "She built her lies out of charm." We spent the next week going through every file my brother had left. Invoices, accounts, email logs. Clara's fingerprints were everywhere. She had convinced him to move funds into a joint account for a business investment that didn't exist. Together, Daniel and I built a timeline, one that connected Clara to forged documents, false emails, even fake phone numbers. Every piece of truth I uncovered made me feel closer to my brother again, and further away from the shame her lies had wrapped around us. Then one morning, Daniel called me. "Mary," he said, voice trembling, "you need to see this." He sent me a link to a local online forum, a page for community events and classifieds. There, under new listings, was an ad for freelance design work. The name on it, Clara Evans. The photo beside it made my blood run cold. Her hair was shorter now, and she was using a new last name, but it was her. The police advised me not to contact her directly. But part of me couldn't let go. I needed to face her, not as the naive sister-in-law she once deceived, but as the woman who now stood in truth. I replied to the ad. I used a pseudonym, and Richards, and asked to meet about a potential design project. She responded within hours. Would tomorrow at noon work? Café Bellamy, downtown? It was her. I knew the rhythm of her words, even through text.
Calm.
Polite. Calculated. That I informed the police of my plan, and they agreed to send plainclothes officers nearby, just in case. The next day, I arrived early. It was one of those clear, brittle afternoons, sunlight sharp enough to cut glass. I sat by the window, watching every face that came through the door. At 12:07, she walked in. She looked different, thinner, guarded, but the way she scanned the room before smiling told me everything. She didn't recognize me at first. I waited until she sat down across from me before taking off my sunglasses. Her eyes widened. "Mary." "Hello, Clara," I said softly. Or should I say, Evans now. Her lips parted, no sound coming out. Then she forced a smile. "You shouldn't have come." "I think I should have done this a long time ago," I said. "You lied to my brother, stole from him, and when he finally tried to protect himself, you let him die thinking he was the fool." Her eyes darted toward the exit. "You don't know what happened." "Then tell me," I said. "Tell me how a forged marriage certificate and stolen money were supposed to help him." For the first time, her composure cracked completely. Her hands clenched the table edge. "I loved him, Mary. You think I didn't? He promised to take care of me. But when things got hard, when his business started to fail, he shut me out. He said I was nothing without him." I swallowed hard. "So, you decided to prove him right by taking everything he had?" Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I just wanted security. He would have ruined me." The bitterness in her tone, it chilled me. "He trusted you," I said quietly. "Even when he suspected, he still tried to protect you. He made that video because part of him still hoped you'd change." She looked down, her jaw trembling. Not from remorse, but frustration. He shouldn't have told you anything, she muttered. That video ruined everything. And then, almost as if remembering herself, she straightened. You can't prove any of it. I smiled faintly. You really think I'd come here without proof? Her face went pale. I gave everything to the police, I said. Your fake accounts, the transfers, the photo with your other husband. It's all in their hands now. This conversation. I nodded slightly toward my bag. Also recorded. Her mouth opened, but before she could speak, 2 officers walked through the door. One of them approached the table calmly. Clara Evans? You're under arrest for fraud and identity theft. She turned to me, eyes burning, and hissed. You don't get to win, Mary. You think they'll believe you're the victim? You were complicit. You lived off his money, too. Her words hit hard, a desperate swing at the truth, but I didn't flinch. I lived off my brother's kindness, I said softly. You lived off his death. They led her away as she struggled, muttering under her breath. The cafe had gone silent. People stared, but I barely noticed. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but release. For the first time since my brother's death, I felt the weight begin to lift. Outside, the autumn wind carried the faint scent of coffee and rain. Daniel called me minutes later. The police had confirmed the arrest. IT was over, except it didn't feel like victory. It felt like standing on the ashes of a home that would never be rebuilt the same. That evening, I went back to my brother's study and placed his old wedding photo on the desk. It wasn't real, not legally, not morally, but it was a moment of truth in his heart. I kept my promise, I whispered. You're free now. And for the first time in months, I let myself cry. Not for her deception, but for the man who loved too deeply and the sister who took too long to see it. But as I'd soon learn, the arrest wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of the public reckoning that would change everything, not just for her, but for me too. The news broke 3 days later, and I wasn't expecting it. I thought maybe it would stay buried in some small legal column, hidden under words like local fraud case. But the headline came in bold, merciless print across the community paper. Widow of local businessman arrested for identity fraud and theft. There it was. Her photo. My brother's name. My family's named by noon. My phone was lighting up like a siren. Cousins, old friends, even neighbors who hadn't spoken to me in months. Everyone wanted to know the story. Some out of concern, some out of gossip. Mary, how could this happen? Was she really not married to him? Why didn't you say something earlier? The hardest call came from my mother. Her voice trembled through the line. You mean to tell me, she whispered, that woman was never even his wife? I closed my eyes.
I'm sorry, Mom.
I didn't know until it was too late. There was a pause. Then a quiet sob. He deserved better, she said. He always did. That evening, I attended the first court hearing. Clara stood in the defendant's box, her once confident posture gone, her shoulders curved inward. The courtroom smelled of wood polish and stale air. I sat in the back, watching her avoid my gaze. Her lawyer tried to argue mental distress, grief, confusion, but the evidence was solid. The forged documents, the hidden bank accounts, the recorded confession. There was no escaping the truth. The judge ordered her remanded while awaiting trial. She didn't look back as they led her away, but I saw the faintest flicker of something in her eyes. Regret, maybe. Or just exhaustion from a web too tangled to maintain. Still, I couldn't feel hatred. Only sadness, because beneath her lies, I'd glimpsed something human. A woman shaped by desperation, not pure malice. And that realization sat heavy on my chest. Back home, the community reaction was mixed. Some people praised me for my courage. Others whispered that I should have handled it privately. One evening, at the local market, an old friend approached me, Ruth, one of my brother's former co-workers. You did the right thing, Mary, she said softly, placing a hand on my arm. He trusted you to protect his name. You did that. Her words steadied me more than she could have known, because while others gossiped, I was rebuilding. Not just the estate, but my own sense of self. I sold my brother's house. The one where every corner still echoed with Clara's fake laughter. I donated half of what I earned to a charity for families affected by financial abuse. It felt right. I also wrote a letter, one I never sent, addressed to Clara. I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I want you to know I don't hate you. I hate what you did. You took advantage of love, and maybe that means you never truly understood it. But I hope someday, when the noise quiets, you learn that peace can't be stolen. It has to be earned. I sealed it, tucked it away in a drawer, and never looked at it again. Months passed. The trial ended with her sentencing, 18 months in a correctional facility, plus restitution for the stolen funds. I thought that would be the end of it. But life, as it often does, had one last lesson for me. A few weeks after the sentencing, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name, written in an unfamiliar but careful hand. Inside was a short note. Mary, you were right about everything. I lied, and I hurt the one person who ever saw me as worth saving. I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know, he wasn't the only one who believed in goodness. You did too. And that's what broke me. I'm sorry. Clara. I read it twice, then 3 times, until the words blurred. Tears came, not out of forgiveness, not yet, but out of release, because that letter didn't erase what she'd done, but it meant the truth had finally reached her heart. When I shared the story with my mother, she nodded slowly. She'll have to live with what she's done, she said. But so will you, my dear. And that's not a burden. That's your gift. You carried his honor through the storm. Her words stayed with me. In the months that followed, I rebuilt quietly. I took a part-time job at the local library. Quiet work that let me be surrounded by stories instead of secrets. I started journaling again. I cooked in silence, played old music in the mornings, and watered my brother's favorite plants every Sunday. Peace didn't come all at once. It arrived like dawn. Slow, soft, inevitable. One afternoon, as I was shelving books, a woman approached me. Excuse me, she said. Are you Mary? I nodded cautiously. She smiled kindly. I read about your story. My sister went through something similar. Her husband forged her signature to sell her business. She never spoke up, but hearing about what you did, it gave her courage. For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened. All I could manage was, thank you. When she left, I stood there for a long time, holding the edge of the bookshelf. Maybe that was what my brother would have wanted. Not revenge, not victory, but truth that helped someone else find strength. And maybe, I thought, that's how peace truly spreads. Not through punishment, but through example. The story could have ended there, quiet, steady, resolved, but one small moment remained. One I'll never forget. On the day the restitution payment finally came through, I took the check and walked to my brother's grave. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. I placed the envelope beside his headstone. You can rest easy now, I whispered. Justice came. Not the kind that hurts, the kind that heals. Then I walked away, lighter than I had been in years. 6 months later, I almost didn't recognize my own life. The noise had faded. No reporters, no whispers, no letters from lawyers. Just quiet mornings, the smell of tea steeping, and the sound of pages turning in the library. Peace, I realized, doesn't announce itself. It tiptoes in point. One morning, while shelving a batch of new arrivals, I came across a book titled The Weight of Truth. I smiled faintly, not because of the title, but because it felt symbolic. For so long, truth had been heavy on my shoulders. Now, it felt like something I could carry lightly, like a story told and put to rest. That afternoon, I closed the library early and walked to the small park near the river. Autumn leaves danced across the path, brushing against my shoes. The sky was low and golden, the kind of light my brother used to love photographing. I sat on our favorite bench, the one with the chipped paint and initials carved into the wood. C+M. It read Clara and Mark. For the first time, I didn't feel anger when I saw it. Only the faint ache of memory. I took out a letter from my coat pocket. It was the same one Clara had sent me, creased, slightly faded. I had read it many times since, each time feeling something different. First, disbelief. Then sorrow. Then, strangely, understanding, because her words weren't about redemption, They were about truth finally catching up. And maybe that was enough that I tore a small corner from the letter and let it drift into the river. For peace, I whispered. For hers. For mine. For my brothers. Later that week, I started volunteering at a local support center, a place that helped families recover from financial and emotional abuse. The first time I walked into the small room filled with strangers, my hands trembled. But when I spoke, told them what happened, how betrayal had nearly broken me, I saw nods, tears, relief. One woman said quietly, "You sound like hope." I didn't feel like hope. But maybe sometimes, surviving is hope enough. That's when I realized something important. The story wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about reclaiming my voice, because for so long, I had been the sister who lost. The woman who was deceived. The one left behind by lies. But now, I was something else. A witness to truth, a keeper of lessons, a survivor of silence, and that felt powerful. Winter came, then spring. Life began to bloom again. In small ways that I adopted a stray cat that kept showing up on my porch. I named him Chance. He followed me everywhere, curling up on my lap during rainy evenings, as if guarding what little peace I'd managed to find. Mom came to stay with me for a few weeks. We cooked together, laughed over old photos, and for the first time in years, the house didn't feel haunted by loss. She looked at me one night and said, "You remind me of your brother when you smile now." I hadn't realized I was smiling. Then, one quiet Sunday, I received another letter. This time from the correctional facility. It was brief, almost hesitant. "Dear Mary, I've been attending the rehabilitation program here. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but they say forgiveness is the last step toward healing. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I just hope someday, when you think of me, it's not with hate. Clara." I sat there for a long time, the paper trembling slightly in my hand. Then, slowly, I wrote back. "Clara, I don't hate you. I never did. I hated what happened. The lies, the hurt, the silence that followed. But I've learned that holding anger is like carrying fire. Eventually, it burns the one who holds it. I've chosen to let it go. Take care of yourself, Mary." I didn't expect a reply. I didn't need one. Writing it was enough. Because forgiveness, I realized, isn't about letting someone off the hook. It's about freeing yourself from the chain. And a few weeks later, I visited my brother's grave again. The grass had grown lush, and the small flowers I planted months ago were blooming in full color. I sat beside the stone, fingers tracing his name. "Mark," I whispered, "I think I finally understand what you meant about love not being blind, just hopeful. You always saw the best in people." Maybe that's what saved me too. A breeze passed over, soft and warm, like an answer carried on the wind. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood, brushed the dirt from my knees, and smiled. For the first time, it didn't feel like goodbye. It felt like balance, life and loss, truth and forgiveness, pain and peace, all coexisting in one quiet moment. I turned to leave, my step steady, my heart unburdened, and as I walked down the hill, I thought to myself, maybe this isn't the end of the story. Maybe it's just the part where healing begins.